So there are like 13 running backs over the past decade who have been as inefficient as Jacobs just was by weighted opportunity differential. Almost all of those running backs did not perform well the following season. Only two of them scored over 15 PPR points per game, and almost every single one of them saw a decrease in their volume the following year. We say in fantasy football, just chase volume, don't worry about the efficiency, it's going to regress. But when players like Jacobs are insanely inefficient, teams take notice. And the Raiders took notice by not re-signing him, and the Packers took notice by drafting Marshawn Lloyd on day 2. I just am out. I want to sell him. I will try to tear down to like an Isaiah Pacheco, a Najee Harris, even a Derrick Henry. I get the allure of King Henry on the Ravens. I just don't get it with Jacobs.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Every year, the Dynasty fantasy football market seemed to get smarter and smarter. So finding the edge to put your team over to win it all seems to be getting harder and harder to find. But today, Fantasy Points has you covered with 4 players that we are trading away right now for multiple reasons. I, of course, am Thomas Tipple. Joining me on this adventure, as always, is Ryan Heath. Ryan, tons of great players. It was very hard not to sift through this list and just pick every running back that was on there. I want to give an honorable mention, a player that we are not talking about, and I'm willing to put myself out there right out of the gate and say Christian McCaffrey is hitting that. There's no way this keeps up territory, being the second running back drafted off the board, still in the early second via Dynasty Data Lab for the ADP of May. I think is kind of insane that AJ Brown goes to the end of the second round over someone like McCaffrey, but McCaffrey is about to go out and put up 26 points per game now that I mentioned it. But Ryan, that being said, the floor is yours. First player that you think Dynasty players should desperately be trading away.
Yeah. So as you said, it's very easy to pick on the running backs. I think aside from the running back position, ADP is fairly efficient right now. But there are a few running backs that I really want to get off my team at current market prices. The first one is Josh Jacobs. He's the RB10 overall on Dynasty Data Lab. And look, Jacobs is coming off career lows in practically every efficiency stat invented, but yards per attempt, missed tackles forced, yards after contact, anything you can think of. And the reason the Raiders let him go, didn't want to re-sign him, is because of that inefficiency. When we look historically at players like Jacobs who are receiving 15 or more weighted opportunities per game, players who underperform their opportunity as much as Jacobs did almost never put up good fantasy seasons in the following year. So there are like 13 running backs over the past decade who have been as inefficient as Jacobs just was by weighted opportunity differential. Almost all of those running backs did not perform well the following season. Only two of them scored over 15 PPR points per game, and almost every single one of them saw a decrease in their volume the following year. We say in fantasy football, just chase volume, don't worry about the efficiency, it's going to regress. But when players like Jacobs are insanely inefficient, teams take notice. And the Raiders took notice by not re-signing him, and the Packers took notice by drafting Marshawn Lloyd on day 2. And I just would not for a second believe that Josh Jacobs is going to see a top 5 workload again. And if he doesn't, his dynasty value collapses. So just the lack of value insulation, along with me being pessimistic on this year's projection for a running back who in dynasty is very much a year-to-year bet, that would be the only reason for you to have Jacobs on your roster. I just am out. I want to sell him. I will try to tear down to like an Isaiah Pacheco, a Najee Harris, even a Derrick Henry. I get the allure of King Henry on the Ravens. I just don't get it with Jacobs. So give me any of those guys, give me a pick on top of it, and I'm happy.
Not just that, but there are better picks to make in your startup. Going immediately after DJ Moore, JJ McCarthy, Jared Goff, Rashad White, even. There's just other options for you at that point. Stay away from Josh Jacobs in your startups. And if you already have him, it might already be too late. But go and check out trade opportunities to get him off of your roster. The Houston Texans' outlook for offense and fantasy football this year is a lot different than last year. Last year, John Mechie was the first wide receiver being drafted off the board, and it turns out you wanted someone being drafted significantly later. I'm taking the same approach to the Houston Texans offense this year for a different reason. Nico Collins is the first wide receiver drafted out of the Texans trio, and he is the first one that I am trying to offload because this is a numbers game. He's in the last year of his contract, coming off an insane out-of-nowhere breakout. The issue is he's being drafted as the wide receiver 18 per Dynasty Data Lab in the month of May. There are other wide receivers with a similar range of outcomes that I feel you should be able to add a plus onto. Now, this might sound like a situation where he holds that fake value, but I can tell you that Nico Collins' 17 points per game looks a lot better than it actually was. This came on a 13.8 expected fantasy points per game. We're now going to have a healthy Tank Dell. When Tank Dell was healthy, he and Nico Collins produced eerily similar numbers in terms of total production, and now you're adding an elite target earner like Stephon Diggs, and I get it. Maybe he's washed. Maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. But even if that's the case, and you have an in-the-slot Stephon Diggs with this offense, it's going to be enough to disrupt the total upside of Nico Collins. I love CJ Stroud. Do not have him passing for 5,000 yards this year. This offense is going to eat up one another's opportunities. And with Nico Collins being the most expensive of the Texans trio, he is the first one of the Texas trio that I am looking to offload right now. At wide receiver, 18 prices. There are so many veteran wide receivers that to me have a similar range of outcomes, and tearing down from Nico Collins to DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, his teammate, Nathaniel Dell, Jordan Addison, even though he's in trouble right now, Rashee Rice, George Pickens. There are just other wide receivers that I feel provide you the same week-to-week upside at a far less risky price. The Houston Texans can re-sign Nico Collins. Sure, that's in the range of possibilities. But with Tank Dell, if he is the prince that was promised, that is, continues to also be a standout wide receiver, these two wide receivers, in my opinion, are going to eat into each other enough that I don't think it warrants Nico Collins wide receiver 18 price. I'm selling Nico Collins.
My only pushback is I see the reason that Collins is the most expensive Texans wide receiver. It's because he was like top 5 in yards per out run last year. This guy's efficiency was unbelievable the second Stroud came into the building. Now, CJ Stroud has done that for a lot of wide receivers over both his college and his professional career. Notably did it for Jackson Smith-Njigba and got all of us really excited about him coming out of college. So I understand the fear that Collins is on a 1-year deal. But look, if the Texans want to keep Nico Collins in the building, they will find a way. They have the franchise tag. Of course, they can always re-sign him. Stephon Diggs is only on a 1-year deal at the moment. So I just like Collins as a bet for I get a wide receiver that's catching balls from CJ Stroud for the next 4 to 5 years, more than likely. Dell, I also like. That's fine. Look, he's undersized. Can he stay healthy? I think there's a lot more concerns about him just as a professional wide receiver. Can he stay on the field? Can he be a true outside playmaker over a long period of time without getting injured? So I love Tank Dell. I agree that I would rather have him at cost than Collins, but I don't think we need to throw Collins out here. I am totally fine holding Collins on my rosters.
My problem is the wide receiver 18 price tag when you have guys like DJ Moore and DK Metcalf and T. Higgins who have put up similar seasons to what Nico had done last year, and their range of outcomes are so close to being similar that if you're giving me those pluses on top, whether it's second round picks, in some cases, if you go down far enough to a player that we're going to be talking about later, and you're tacking a 1 on top of it based on what the data is telling us for what communities feel the value is, I'm more than happy stacking those extra pieces on top of my extra wide receiver for Nico Collins, who I think is very good, but I definitely do not believe that the jump from 13.8 expected fantasy points per game to 17.4 in his breakout year is at all sustainable. I'm willing to bet against that hyper efficiency, especially knowing how good he and Tank Dell both were when they were both on the field at the same time. Nico's true breakout did not happen until he got to be the alpha himself. He proved that he got to do it. I'm betting against the efficiency. I'm betting that I can get replaceable production on the market with those added bonuses and those sweet, sweet liquid assets that are rookie draft picks.
Fair enough. Yeah. If there's a player that makes your point for you, it would be Noah Brown having multiple wide receiver 1 level weeks in this offense. So I totally hear where you're coming from. I still am fine with Collins, but I respect the process here.
Perhaps I'm just thinking that there shouldn't be as big a gap from wide receiver 18 to Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 33. If you're telling me that I can tear down from Nico into a Devontae Adams in a first, that's just to me how you build a contending team while adding on to keep that team contending year over year over year. So nice back and forth. It'll be interesting. Let us know in the comments what you think you should do with Nico Collins versus the rest of the Houston Texans wide receiver room. Unsurprisingly, the next player on the docket is again a running back, because I am convinced that Ryan hates them all. But let's talk about the next running back that should be on the chopping block for all dynasty teams right now.
Yes, I am the dynasty wide receiver bro that is in all of your nightmares. Yes, I want to sell all of the running backs. Not really, only the ones that are historically inefficient, are aging, and have a lot of role uncertainty. So that's Tony Pollard in a nutshell. Look, Pollard, much like Josh Jacobs, who we already discussed, coming off some horrible efficiency stats. He was 8th worst by missed tackles forced per touch last year, which is really crazy because he was very, very good in that stat for much of his career. Same goes for most other efficiency stats. But I don't think it's a coincidence that the moment Tony Pollard gets a full-on bell cow role, gets all of this volume sustained over a full season, that he can't follow up on his efficiency. I know it's an argument we had for years and years and years. Could Tony Pollard maintain this efficiency in a full-time bell cow role? I was admittedly on the Tony Pollard bull case side of it, but we've done the experiment at this point. We can say he was hampered by an injury he suffered the previous season at the end of the year. But regardless, the perception now of every NFL team is that Tony Pollard cannot carry a full bell cow style workload. And we can only assume that's the perception that the Titans have. Look, the Titans still have Tajay Spears under contract. He will be entering his 2nd year in the league. 2nd-year running backs break out a lot. 9 out of 10 of the biggest workload increases at the running back position that have mattered over the past decade came in year 2. This is names like James Conner, Devontae Freeman, Kyron Williams, guys who weren't viewed as unbelievably incredible talents heading into year 2. I think that is in Tajay Spears' range of outcomes, that he just kind of takes over this backfield. It's also pretty close to the median outcome that he just makes Pollard completely unpalatable to play in your fantasy lineup from week to week. And if that's the case, then what are we doing here? Tony Pollard is getting older. He's no longer this exciting 22-year-old backup handcuff running back that we are excited to have on our dynasty rosters. Why is Tony Pollard the RB24 in dynasty right now, and Spears is just the RB21? I just, given the gap in age, I don't understand, considering they have very, very similar projected range of outcomes this year, where Spears just has a lot more of a ceiling there going forward. So get rid of Tony Pollard, get him off your rosters. Happy to add like a little pick to just go get Tajay Spears at that point.
I think we went through a period of time where the Ezekiel Elliott industrial complex was fighting their fight so hard. Sadly, it turned out that they got the last laugh because the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys in 2024 is still Ezekiel Elliott. The Tony Pollard cult has, in fact, lost the war, as we are now once again hoping and praying for Tony Pollard to break out and be a lead running back and a successful running back for your dynasty teams. Like Ryan points out, it is time to get out. There are other options I would be looking to get out.
Yeah. Look, and it's going to be even harder here. Last year, Tony Pollard, 61 red zone carries, the second most of any running back in the league. That's what the Dallas Cowboys offense can do for you. What is Will Levis going to be able to do for Tony Pollard? That's extremely unclear at this point. So, yeah, just get him off my teams, please.
The answer is ball the fuck out, Ryan, because we do not trash Mayo Man or Billy Jeans. We don't insult fucking Will Levis here. All right? You're going to make me mad.
I wouldn't dream of it.
Better not. QB1. QB1 this year, Ryan. I've often been called a hater, but I just want it known that what I'm about to say does not mean that I think that Zay Flowers is a bad NFL wide receiver. Given how many wide receivers, though, have a similar range of outcomes as the Baltimore Ravens screen merchant, I think he is what I call a fake value wide receiver. With a 0.38 expected fantasy points per route run, I don't feel like that is wide receiver 20 material. And he is the wide receiver 20. If you look on the May ADP on Dynasty Data Lab, he's wide receiver 20 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 29 on Fantasy Calc. So there are some differing opinions of the jack of all trades wide receiver for Baltimore. But his 12 points per game were good. But when you have so many other veteran options at the position, it really diminishes what that return is. Yes, he has Lamar Jackson, who has the opportunity to put up 50 fantasy points, and you would expect that Zay Flowers gets to reap those same benefits. But unfortunately, it's less often than you would have wanted for a quarterback who just went through an MVP type campaign. I understand he is a rookie, but let's keep in mind that Lamar Jackson at no point has ever boosted his wide receivers to significant fantasy upside for long stretches of time. Hollywood Brown in his second and third year had stretches of 4 to 6 games where he was a top 5, top 8 producing wide receiver in fantasy football. Unfortunately, the other side of that left you with nothing but misery and despair. And unfortunately, Mark Andrews is still the alpha in that offense. Not saying that Zay Flowers cannot have some blow-up games, but if you are telling me that I can tear down from the wide receiver 20 to, say, the wide receiver, 40, and go and get Christian Kirk and get so much more on top of that. Once again, my goal in fantasy is to get similar production and a lot of plus value on top of it so I can continue making moves to better my team, get more shots at the draft, etc., etc. And Zay Flowers, for me, feels like he is a fake value wide receiver 20, hot name on a hot fantasy team, but they just brought in Derrick Henry. If there is any player that is going to signal that they are going to irritate all of us and hand the ball off inside the 10 every single time, they just decided for no reason that we were just going to give Gus Edwards an obscene amount of rushing touchdowns. Oh, and Justin, you think they're going to throw it because Justice Hill is in? Nah. They slam it up the A gap with Justice Hill just to prove that they can. Offensive coordinator change, a lot of things happening in that offense. And I don't think Zay Flowers has enough week to week upside for me to not want to move off of him and go and get some of these other targets. I mean, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, all of them possible of hitting that 12 to 14 point per game range. I'm very disappointed in Zay Flowers' rookie season, and not just because I'm a scorned Ravens fan that watched somebody dive ball first into defenders when they didn't have to and fumble their Super Bowl opportunity away. I swear that's not it. If you just look at the numbers, they won't lie. He has about the same upside with everything that we know right now as a lot of these vets way down the board.
I agree completely. Yeah, look, there are a lot of year 2 wide receivers heading into this year sort of in this mold where a lot of their production came on design targets, on screens. In Flowers' case, he was Todd Monken's favorite toy when he deploys pre-snap motion. When the Ravens deployed pre-snap motion, Zay Flowers' first read target share, 37.6%. That was top 10. On all plays overall, just 24th in first read target share. So that tells you right there how much these sort of Mickey Mouse plays are pumping up the stat line for Zay Flowers. And that's fine as long as he continues to be Todd Monken's favorite to draw those types of plays up for. But it doesn't really tell us anything about his ceiling or his ability to operate as, for lack of a better term, a real wide receiver in the intermediate areas who has the upside to go out and put up a serious fantasy wide receiver 1 type of season. So I agree completely. I would happily trade Zay Flowers away for any sort of nesting doll tier wide receiver with a plus on top of it. The production's going to be similar, and I just do not see the upside that you should be getting with drafting a top 20 wide receiver in Dynasty with Zay Flowers.